right, so I think if we think about last week's talk, there's obviously a lot of detail about AI, and I think maybe looking back, digital transformation almost should have been before, but it doesn't really matter. But essentially, when you think about digital transformation, like it might make sense to my generation or Jared's generation, but I think the generation that you guys are, you're going to enter a digitally transformed world already. So you'll find a lot of businesses, big businesses like banks and insurance, etc., everybody talking about digital transformation. But they basically come from a legacy of an older business that does things manually, does a lot of paperwork. So for them, when they look to their future, they need to go on what's called like a digital transformation journey. So, but the reality is probably when you guys enter the workforce, the type of businesses that are already there or the types of things that you're gonna do, you're not, I mean, how many of you have sent a fax? Okay. Have you received a fax as well? So I think that's basically it. I mean, if you think like, when was the last time you actually even say sent an SMS, not say like a WhatsApp or something? You know, so the reality is that for a lot of the businesses out there, they still digitally transforming. You know, basically you've got, say if you think about me, say I'm 37 now, chances are in the professional workforce, probably, let's say 40% of the workforce are probably older than me, and maybe 60% are maybe younger than me. So there's still, say, 40% of the workforce that's not necessarily digitally savvy. They didn't grow up with a computer. How many of you have your own laptop or own computer? Okay. Basically, if you ask that question 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I don't know if anybody would basically even have their own laptop. So that's just to give you some perspective, is that you guys will enter a world already digitally transformed. But I think it's important to know when you enter it, sort of what you're getting into and where businesses are coming from. And there's probably be businesses that I mentioned that, you know, the brands won't even make sense. What they did before won't even make sense to you. So just a brief introduction. Obviously, as before, my name's Andrew Bosma. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of OQLIS Software Corporation. And data is our game, basically. All right, so there is a definition for digital transformation. The basics is that it's when businesses, organizations, or entire industries use new technologies to change how they operate. So probably none of you would ever even remember a flip phone or a world where smartphones didn't exist. Or in the example of Netflix, you know, did you guys ever go rent a DVD? Okay.
Once.
Okay. So when I was probably 19, 20, I worked in a video store. It was still called, I think, Videorama, you know, video. So, yeah, I don't know if they even exist anymore. So why does it matter? Why does it matter to be digitally transformed? So in a changing world, in a more digital world, if all your competitors are doing it, you have to do it and you have to stay relevant. The average customer will expect more from you. So if, for instance, you, I know in last week I mentioned insurance, but imagine if an insurance company now didn't have an app that you could put your claim in, and you had to phone in your claim and they posted you the form that you needed to sign and you had to post it back. Just think about that time delay, and also think about what you expect. Would you want to actually deal with that insurance company if that's the process? You know, you'd want to basically have the app, you want to self-service and be in control of your own customer service, basically. And then it's important when thinking about creating new products and new services. So in the example, for instance, like a Netflix, they were originally like a Videorama, where basically they'd post DVDs and VHSs across America. And then they basically got into the streaming market. And then they opened up a whole new market on content streaming and video streaming. Something that we take for granted today that didn't exist those years ago. But the key thing is that it's integrating this technology into all areas of business and society, and basically fundamentally changing how it operates. So it's one of those things where if a business says, no, we're on this digital transformation journey, but we've still got a big contract for printers in our office, and we print on a lot of paper. It's one of those things that you can't go like half in. You have to fully embrace it and say, well, okay, we're not going to print anything. Everything's going to go paperless. Okay, so think about this example, right? So when last have any of you actually looked at a physical map? Okay. So now basically we've got a GPS in our pockets, which is our phone, and think about Google Maps. But there was a time where you had to basically pull out an atlas or a road map and sort of figure out where you wanted to go. You had to bring it with you on a trip. And that wasn't that long ago. And now, if you look what you do with your GPS, even what I did today, where I was coming from, I put in office. I know how to get here, but I put it in anyway. But it's giving me more. It's giving me what time will I arrive? Is there traffic? It might divert me to the best route. So it's actually giving me a better experience than an old atlas ever would. And I think the key thing to think about, it's actually inevitable. Probably when the guys were selling, you used to be able to go to Engine and buy like a map book, and there was a guy that actually printed those map books and sold them through Engine. And now, basically, that I don't think you'd even sell one. Even from a banking point of view, imagine you needed to go into a bank, make an appointment with a bank manager, and maybe come there with a wad of cash and go deposit it. Now we go on our phones, we check our balances, we make transactions, and we basically self-service digitally. Shopping, even from a shopping experience point of view and the whole supply chain around shopping, I mean, there was a time, even when you'd order online and you'd get your parcel, you'd actually have to sign a physical piece of paper, where now guys have a tablet or something like that where you actually sign, and then that integrates back into the tracking system. Then you get an SMS automatically, and so the whole process, even from a shopping experience point of view, has gone digital. All right, so digital transformation doesn't exist in a vacuum. So there's different elements of technology that allow these things to happen. So we spoke about it last week, but AI is one component of it. So with all information being digital, you're actually not capturing data. Now you can actually train AI models, and you can do all these things on it. You can use IoT, Internet of Things. So think about the example of you make an order on an online shopping, and your goods are out for delivery. And say, for instance, that delivery van has got a GPS tracker, like an IoT device, that pushes data to a cloud-based service. And then when you want to see where your parcel is, you're going to get, say, like a GPS location of where that guy is. So all of these technology pieces are enablers within the digital transformation space. And then obviously, cloud computing. Cloud computing is basically servers living in basically somebody else's server farm that you subscribe to.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
The IoT, do you guys know what that means? No, can you just quickly glance
Sure.
on it? I'm not sure. Can you just quickly
100%. So what's interesting about IoT, it's actually quite a big part of our business. And the reason why is we are doing a project. I don't know if you've heard of the funeral home AFBOB. Okay, so it's a bit morbid, but basically when you die, your body depends on what you want to do with your body or your, say, loved one's body. You'll basically go into a mortuary, and that mortuary is basically one big fridge with a lot of doors, and they'll wheel your body in there. But the thing about a dead body is that it's decomposing. And the lower the temperature, the slower the decomposition. So those fridges are basically temperature controlled. So basically you don't want a hot mortuary. So the key thing that AVBOB wanted to do was to say, okay, cool, they have certain set points in their fridges, but they have got, let's call it probably 180 different mortuaries across the country. Now, for them to either check what the temperature is at every single one, it's quite a mission. So basically, part of their, let's call it, digital transformation journey was to say, well, let's put remote temperature sensors in all our mortuaries, and let's set thresholds of what those mortuaries should be. So basically, they contracted a company that we work with that sell IoT devices. So it was a temperature probe that runs off the Sigfox network. I don't know if you've heard of Sigfox. So Sigfox is a low radio band transfer service provider. So basically how it works is sort of like a cell tower that does very long, low frequency radio waves. And your little device basically communicates with that tower, and then that tower basically pushes it to their central service, and then you can route that data to different places. So you could take a Sigfox device and be in a remote area and it'll still connect. I think it's got like a 45 kilometer communication radius. So they had Sigfox temperature sensors in each of the mortuaries. But also what they wanted to do was, because of load shedding, they've got generators that run the compressors of these fridges, so that when there's no power, the generators kick on and they keep the mortuary cool. And they wanted to track whether that generator is on or not. So I don't know if you guys know what a CT clamp is, but basically what it is, it's a magnetic coil that sits around a wire, and that measures the current that goes through that wire. So if there is current, it means the generator's on. And then there's a device that picks up that signal and over a SIM card, like a Vodacom network, pushes that data. So now you've got a temperature probe and you've got whether the generator's on or not. That goes, let's call it, through the radio waves, and it goes to our server. So we've got a server that's basically waiting to receive messages. I'll do a demo on it in our Q&A, which should be pretty cool. And then all of that data comes in. And then if you think about it, if you were running AVBOB and across the whole country, what do you want to see? You want to see a dashboard that shows you what's my temperature across all my regions, which one's out of spec, which one's below spec, and I want to separate that into different provinces and actually see it. So the key thing is that IoT is enabling AVBOB to manage their mortuaries better, basically. That's the key thing that they wanted to do. So that's one piece of technology that is helping them on their digital transformation journey. Is that good from an IoT point of view? What I'll do is in the Q&A, I'll take you through some cool IoT examples in the software, and you'll sort of get a sense of why there's so much hype about it and why it can be so valuable. All right. So we spoke about AI, obviously IoT, cloud computing. I skimmed over it, but do you guys know in general what cloud computing even means? Must I deep dive into that? Okay. So how many of you know what a server is? Okay, cool. That's the first step. So basically it's like your laptop, but big, and it doesn't move around. But the key thing is with cloud computing, you can subscribe to services that give you like a piece of a server's compute. So a couple of years ago, they, I don't know who developed it originally, but it's called virtualization. So for instance, if you took my laptop and say, well, right now it's running some slides, but it's probably at, let's call it 5% CPU. But now this thing's consuming energy, it's sitting here, but say you need 10% CPU. So I can actually virtually slice my computer's performance in little bits and then offer you, for instance, 10% of my compute. I've still got the same server, but now I can virtualize one piece and then give you a slice of that. I can give you 10%, 10%, 10%. So it's the same hardware. It's basically just virtualized. And for you experiencing that server, you won't know the difference because you're going to log in, see your little screen, whether it's a real machine or not, or a virtual machine, it doesn't really matter. So basically cloud computing is like that, just at massive scale. So you've got services like Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, you've got Amazon Web Services. I don't know if you've heard of that. But these are all, say, brands and names that you're going to experience when you sort of enter the workforce. Basically, the conversation would be, oh, what cloud are you running in? Are you running in Microsoft or Google, sort of thing? All right, so I also mentioned there's a changing in customer expectation. So what I mean by that is as you enter the market, your entire life will be digital. So, I mean, I don't know, do you guys still get physically printed report cards or does it get emailed to you? Okay, email, okay. I mean, that wasn't even a thing when I was at school. Like, you could literally hide your report from your parents if you wanted to just say you never got it. So, I mean, that's exactly that. So all of you have email addresses. I mean, I can't even remember the age I was when I got an email address. So you're going to come to expect that type of interaction with everything and everyone you deal with. It'll be like, don't phone me, just email me the details. It'll be something like that. Or just point me to the online form that I need to fill in. I don't want to print it out, write in all the things, rescan it, and then email it. And, something that's new, not sort of new in the market, but really taking hold is even digital signatures, sort of like e-signatures, so guaranteeing that you actually signed for something. So you will come to expect that. And then any business that doesn't do that for you, you're going to be like, oh, that experience wasn't great. That was either long or not a great experience. Then from a regulatory point of view, when things are digital, they're sort of easier to track and easier to store. For instance, a couple of years ago, I did a project where a manufacturer of tile grout was basically on a quality management journey, let's call it that. So there's different, I don't know if you guys know what ISO standards are. So basically there's a central organization that sets out the standards of what you should do, sort of given a certain thing. So if you want to be ISO certified in terms of quality management, you need to follow a quality management process. So that means that you do regular testing on your product, you store those results. In an audit, you can provide those results back within a certain amount of time. If some customer recalls a product, you can trace that batch through the supply chain, etc. So what they were doing is that they were manually writing on a piece of paper all the tests that they were doing on this grout. So if you think about tile grout, there's a lot of components that go into it. But if, for instance, you're tiling a whole shopping mall and then suddenly, maybe 2 years later, the whole shopping floor's tiles start lifting and cracking, they can't actually have that. They need to make sure that their quality standards are there so that when, say, architects spec their grout for buildings, that it meets certain standards. So we built a LIMS system, Laboratory Information Management System, that allows them to capture those quality results. So they would do a test, they would capture those results, basically hit save, that would be logged in a database, then they would go ahead and do the next test and test and test. And all of that information has been saved in a database that they can retrieve. where previously it was all on paper. Then they would have to look at the file and try to find it, or they would lose the file. So from a regulatory point of view, if you need to produce your results within a certain amount of time, paperwork is not going to cut it. And then also the world is moving on. So as globalization is happening and competition is getting more fierce, everybody's going to go the digital journey, and those who don't basically will get left behind. All right, so let's think about what different industries and what they're doing. So if you think about healthcare, we don't really do it in South Africa, but you can basically, if you jump on a Zoom call with your doctor, say internationally, so that's changing the game as how doctors will consult with you. In terms of wearable devices, if you think about a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, your doctor might say, okay, cool, just give me permissions to download your Apple Watch data so I can track your heart rate over the last 3 days. Something that would be unheard of 10 years ago. All right, I think the key thing from an education point of view is if, so when was COVID? That was 2020, so it's 4 years ago. So at that stage, when it was all locked down, etc., everybody couldn't go to school. So those who weren't digitally savvy, that didn't have their material online, what did they do? They really, really, really struggled. One of the interesting things is my sister is a grade 2 teacher, and basically post-COVID, she started her own school, but sort of completely digital. From let's call it from a content point of view. The learning was still in person, and she basically became a facilitator for the online course. And to me, that's actually the future of education, is that, if you think about you guys in office, you have to be in the area unless you're a boarder. But if you think about it, maybe in 10 years' time, you could be at office, but remote in Pietermaritzburg, for all that matters. And then you digitally learning in office, and maybe you go in twice a year, something like that. So remote education and online learning. And if you think about it, all your teachers should basically be producing their own content. You're giving the lesson anyway, you might as well record it, and it basically becomes content for you to use. So I think education is a very big industry that's been affected by digital transformation, and then obviously you get online courses like Udemy, etc. And then from a retail point of view, one of the first things I did out of varsity, maybe the second thing I did, my father-in-law is a retailer. He owns a shop, basically, and they sell fruit and vegetables and groceries, obviously. But so that was, let's call it, I think it was 2011. In 2011, e-commerce, there was Take-A-Lot and etc., but it hadn't really taken hold. The idea of, say, like a Checker 60 or a Woolies Dash or whatever it is, there was nothing back then. So I said to him, okay, looking at what you sort of want to do and looking at your future, have you thought about e-commerce? And he's like, no, well, he sells fruit and vegetables. Like, what would he know about e-commerce? So I said, okay, cool, let me give it a shot. So basically what I did is I built an e-commerce store that sort of listed all the key things that he wanted to sell. And their market is geared towards the average consumer, but it's also geared towards like catering and big bulk type buyers. So for instance, if you wanted to buy a bag of cabbage, you couldn't go to Pick n Pay or Woolies and buy a bag of cabbage, but you can go to Evergreens and you can buy a bag of cabbage. And for some people, they have to buy a bag of cabbage. So if you're a very big family, you're on a limited budget, etc. So we built out basically the e-commerce store. We listed key products and we went live. And then, we started taking orders, started marketing it. And I must look at the numbers, but, I was busy with that for probably about 6 months. I think it was maybe 2 years ago, he gave me the number. So over a couple of years, I think it had done like say 16 million Rand in sales of vegetables. just through like an e-commerce channel. And what was great about it is that the buyer was, like the ideal buyer was the manager of a catering business that didn't have time to go to the shop. So they would basically log their order, we'd fulfill the order, load it in a bakkie. Basically, I've loaded a bakkie with a pallet of potatoes, and I've driven to Boksburg. So that's one example. Say, if retailers don't embrace e-commerce, you're sort of missing the gap. I think brick and mortar will always stay, but you're missing a channel. There's a word called omni-channel retailing. So basically, go through every channel. You should even be socially selling. Why can't you buy something on Instagram? Why can't you buy something on Facebook? It's just another digital platform. So the reality is that you don't know it's going to be safe. It's going to be as safe as the non-digital world, I suppose I would say that. But I think the key thing is, and it's in my latest slide, basically digital transformation is not all rosy. There are risks, and exactly what you mentioned, cybersecurity is a huge risk, huge risk. We do a lot of work for big ICT providers. So an ICT is information, communication, and technology provider. So brands like Datacentrics, Gajima, Liquid Telecom. So all these brands, they, for instance, they'll sell you a computer, but for instance, say you're selling into a big company with 4,000 people. So say you're going to sell 4,000 laptops. Each one of those laptops is a vulnerability into that business's data. So along with that laptop needs to go an antivirus that goes on that laptop, a VPN connection to guarantee that all traffic gets routed to the same place. There needs to be what's called endpoint security, which means there's like a little app that lives on your laptop that makes sure that all the right apps are installed. Then what you need to do is you need to log all the network traffic through a service like Cloudflare, which will collect all the logs, and then you need to analyze the logs. And then you get things called like a cybersecurity operations center that pass all those logs, identify anomalies and risks, and alert the business to those risks. So like there's a whole ecosystem of technology that sits around the digital space, that such a simple thing as selling you a laptop and you using it in your business carries risks, and those risks have to be managed. So for instance, the example of hacking a bank. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of SSL. Basically, if you look in your browser, you're going to see HTTPS or HTTP. So HTTPS is an SSL-enabled website. And how that works is there's cryptography that sits on your browser and that sits on the server that you are actually communicating to. And then sitting on that server is what's called a private key, and sitting on your browser is what's called a certificate. And those two things decrypts the information that you transfer between it. Whereas SSL, basically it's just going to be like random letters and numbers, and then those random letters and numbers are decrypted on the server side so that there's a guarantee that your information is going to the right place at the right time. And chances are you guys are just going to take for granted that you're putting information into websites and might not even look whether there's HTTP or HTTPS. Google Chrome will probably warn you, but it's also something to take note of. And I think as far as risks go, is that each one of you will have to assume your own responsibility for your own security. So you're going to have to become more digitally savvy and more digitally secure, because nobody's going to do it for you. That's a very key thing to know as well. So you'll have to take responsibility for your own online security. I think you have to take a realistic approach, in that if you think you'll ever be 100% secure, you'll be the first victim, because it's the same, for instance, in your house. Yes, you can have an electric fence, you can have an alarm, you can have a dog. There's still an inherent risk in everything. And it's the same when you're developing software or using somebody's software like a bank. I would say that the world has improved a lot, but even if you think Microsoft itself has known existing vulnerabilities that have not been patched yet. So we're talking about like operating system level vulnerabilities that basically all these services sit on top. So if you think about like the NSA, which is basically the US spy organization, they've got all the hacks before any of the rest of us do. So the key thing to know there is that you'll never be 100% secure. So you'll always be working on improving your security. Exactly like the banks, and exactly how I explain, for instance, all these banks. One of Datacentrix's customers is the Central Bank of Lesotho. Now, that goes through a cybersecurity operations center. All of that data is logged, and there's rules that sit on top of that to say, well, who's logging in? How many times has their password failed? Who's logging in? Where are they coming from? Who has got like irregular activity of strange services running on their laptops, So yeah, you're never going to be 100% secure, but it's one of those things, if you don't monitor and measure it, you won't even know you're not secure. So that's the key thing. It starts with knowing and then sort of improving over time. And it's the same thing, even in our software. Without a doubt, there are some potential vulnerabilities. So actually what you have to do is security has to be even part of the way you code. There's something called SQL injection, where, for instance, if you're filling a form online, you can try it sometime. Say you want to fill in some form online and just Google basic SQL injection hacks, and then just copy some text and put it in the form and see if it submits. But what happens is when you program the capturing of those forms, you need to take that information and you need to load it into a database. Now, a database, there's certain functions in a database that you could drop the entire database and lose all your data. So, for instance, your username is single quote, semicolon, drop database, master, close, semicolon. Now, if somebody isn't protecting themselves against SQL injection, they're going to accept that as a username. And when they look at that information server side, they're going to say, select star from user where username like or username is, and they're going to get a semicolon, which basically breaks a SQL statement. And then they're going to get a drop database master. And if they execute that query, they're going to find that username, but immediately drop the database. So something like that, obviously, like say, pretty basic. And if somebody's not protected against that, their security is bad. But so that's just one example of types of vulnerabilities, say like SQL injection that you need to protect against, and even when you're coding. And you can't. The thing about coding is that you have to not trust a user's input, which seems counterintuitive because you want a user to input stuff in there, but you can't trust what he's going to put in there. It's quite counterintuitive.
I just want to add that there are certain keyloggers and viruses and antiviruses aren't legally allowed to detect, especially if they're based in America. For example, anti-malware used by the NSA and the CIA, FBI, all those three-letter organizations. Antiviruses aren't legally allowed to intercept or stop them, and VPNs are legally required to give those organizations your real IP address, real address for when you let's say searching. So even though you have certain precautions to make yourself safe, it really doesn't do much.
Yeah, I think the key thing there is that what are you doing? You're trusting somebody else with your security. And that's the tough thing, is that you're trusting that antivirus program to keep you safe. So like I run a Mac, I don't run any antivirus. Like I'm hoping I don't have any viruses, I'm sure I don't. But it's the same thing, say like why I don't use a Windows machine, because exactly that. You could leave a Windows machine right here, sitting, connected to one Wi-Fi, and then suddenly you've got like 1 million stuff on it that you didn't install on there. How does that happen? So you have to then take your own responsibility and say like a VPN service. So in our company, we do our own VPN server. So we're not dependent on another third-party service for it. It's basically open source VPN software. There's a server that we set up and there's a client that you install on your laptop. And then I know all my traffic is basically getting routed to that singular server. I'm the one in control of it. And then all the traffic just pushes out from that server. That server actually sits in the UK. So whenever we're in the office, basically we'll get like served UK ads, or like go to Google recommends UK-based websites. So maybe it's one of those things that even from a business point of view is that you might want to set up your own services around security, like set up your own VPN server, or hire your own cybersecurity expert, or use Macs. I mean, our entire office, we just use Macs. An example like that. All right, and then also under finances, obviously, you guys have grown up in a world of cryptocurrency. That wasn't the case for me, probably not the case for Jared as well. Crypto is essentially relatively new to us. But part of your financial future, crypto will be a part of your portfolio. And that's a completely digital experience. And there might be other elements related to the tech of blockchain that you might use in your life, and you won't even realize it. Okay, and then let's call it the more traditional aspect is, regular businesses moving from paper to digital. So there's a logo there called Ryco, and they sell printers. And then HP, which obviously sells laptops. And then transport and logistics, if you think about Uber and Lyft, if you were in New York City, you'd maybe have to call a cab. But basically now you'll go on Uber, and it's a completely digital transportation experience. Cool. To navigate this digital world, what do you need? What do you need and what do you need to do? All right, so I mentioned it last week, but if you've got some basic coding understanding, doesn't mean you need to be an expert, but those would be very good skills to have. Coding, data analysis, so like I'm a bit biased towards that particular skill because that's what our business does. But you will have to interpret in your future Excel spreadsheets. You'll have to make sense of them. You'll have to make sense of your business data. You'll have to, look at a P&L. You'll have to look at a balance sheet. You'll have to do all that stuff. And if you don't have some element of data analysis in your toolbox, you're going to struggle a little bit. And then obviously you need a keen sense of innovation. So you need to think about all of these technologies as solutions that you can use in your life and sort of take a more of an innovative approach. All right, soft skills, adaptability, and being able to communicate clearly and professionally through digital channels. So you guys will probably also grow up in this, but email etiquette, as an example, becomes a thing when you're in the working world. You can't just say, for instance, like your corporate customer. Hi, Joe, what's going on? Was the weekend good? About that project we're going to do, ? That's not necessarily how you communicate. It's like, hello, John, I hope you're well. Last time we spoke, we mentioned that we were going to embark on this project. The next steps we agreed are these and these and these. Where can we find some time in your diary to unpack our next steps? So that would be an example of clear and professional communication through those digital channels. And I'm also having like a professional looking video call, making sure your background is nice, your lighting's good. Obviously, writing skills are essential. That's self-explanatory. And the key thing is that you're going to work with your colleagues in a virtual environment. So one of the interesting things is that, say about 5 years ago, when we were would go sell our software to a customer, potential customer, we'd get in the car, drive to the office, we'd sit, have coffee, wait for the person to get ready, go to the boardroom, set up the laptop, do a demo, do the demo for an hour, talk for 30 minutes afterwards, then drive home, and basically it was 4 hours to do 1 hour of meeting. Like, I can't think in the last 2 years where we've actually gone to a customer's business premise. It's basically we've sold digitally, online, video call, do our demos online, communicate via email. So yeah, people are buying and trusting you over these digital channels and video calls, where that has changed significantly. 5 years ago, you'd have to look the guy in the eye before he gave you like R1. Digital literacy, you need to be comfortable and skilled in using digital tools, and you need to navigate the internet safely and evaluate online information critically. So like I said, don't trust a user's input. Don't even trust the website that's asking you to put the stuff in that you want to. Just make sure and protect your digital privacy. You guys are going to be sort of digital native, so your entire identity is already digital. Instagram knows exactly who you are and what you like. Entrepreneurial mindset, that's also self-explanatory, and seeing opportunities where other might see obstacles. And then another important thing is just being aware from a cybersecurity point of view. All right, it's a couple of challenges. People are very resistant to change. If you've got, say an old lady in accounting that likes her printed notebooks and her files or whatever, she's going to be very resistant to doing anything digital. So being sort of sensitive to people's resistance to change. Obviously, cybersecurity is a huge challenge, and you need to be aware. The cost of going digital is quite high. So obviously, digital skills are expensive and in demand. So doing these things from a software point of view, it is expensive to do. And right now, there's not a lot of, say, people to do it. So there's a skills gap, but then there's opportunity there too. So I think that's maybe a nice way to think about your future, say from an entrepreneurial point of view. Say you start a business, right? You've got the next best idea in a particular thing. Guaranteed that in the future, your business model will be disrupted by something else. Just as in these examples that I'm going to cover, their business models were disrupted by a particular technology. And if these businesses didn't embrace that technology or embrace that change, understand that change and adapt to it, they wouldn't be around. So think about this, right? So you've got Netflix. Netflix wasn't alone. There was a company in the US called Blockbuster doing the exact same thing. Do you even know about Blockbuster? No. Okay, you only know about it because it doesn't exist, or So even in your own journeys, be it your own business, always be ready to adapt to change and sort of embrace what the next wave, because there's a industry terminology called the fourth industrial revolution, basically is like the buzzword. But guaranteed, just as much as there was the first, just as much as there was the second, just as much as there was the third, just as much as now there's the fourth, there will be the fifth. So either you will be a victim of the fifth or embrace the fifth. So think about Netflix. It went from posting DVDs around America into basically, I would say, the most popular content streaming platform. Think about Tesla. Basically, the idea of electric cars disrupted an automotive industry where they focused on a completely digital experience in the car as a priority. All the other car manufacturers were like, well, here's my car and here's some 5.7-inch infotainment screen that is terrible to use. where Tesla says, well, here's like a screen that takes up most of the cabin, and here's everything you can do on it. And then also, over-the-air software updates. Technology is always changing. Code is always getting better. Things are always upgrading. So thinking about a seamless upgrade path across these technologies, Tesla were extremely innovative in for their over-the-air software updates. Think about Airbnb. Previously, you'd maybe go to a particular city, you'd like look in the yellow pages, phone a B&B and be like, oh, do you have any place for me? Where right now you can go on an app and plan where you want to go, where you want to stay, not even talk to the owner if you want to, and have a completely digital experience where just a couple of years ago it would be completely manual. All right, and then obviously, L'Oreal, they just want to sell you more beauty and cosmetic products. But if you think about it, create a little filter, augmented reality filter on your camera that you might get to try a particular shade of makeup or a new hairstyle. That might be cool. All right, so we spoke a little bit about this in the past. So digital transformation and you, so how does it relate to you? Education, embracing and the access to educational resources. Obviously for your careers, you will have to use and master digital tools and platforms. And mastering these platforms, these skills are in high demand. You guys will live in a world where remote work is not even like funny. When I entered the working world, there was no such thing as remote work, basically, even in the technology space. But sort of work from anywhere has really taken root. And then obviously from an entrepreneurship point of view, it's easier than ever to get started with your own business. I know even through F&B, because I've done it before, you literally can sign up for a bank account online. They register you at CIPC online, and 7 days later, you've got a registered business name, you've got your company number, and you've got a bank account to suit. And now all you have to do is do business and sell something, actually do something of value to fill that account with money. So it's very low barrier to starting your own business. And then obviously, you guys will be digital citizens by nature. And, there was a time where sort of comments in, for instance, YouTube was all anonymous and it actually wasn't even personal. But essentially what you want to do now is you want to make sure that you engage responsibly in these sort of comment sections or online communities, because all of that data is stored and all of that data is tracked and it basically ties back to you. Okay, and then cultural exchange. Obviously, as we get more digitally connected, the world becomes smaller. We might make friends with people in other countries, other cultures, and just sort of all the more integrated. All right, so these are the key areas in terms of future. So AI and automation, basically things are just going to get more AI driven and more automated. And as I mentioned last week, repetitive and administrative will be the first victims. Internet of Things is basically connecting the real world into the digital world. Our world, essentially, you'll have a digital twin that relates to the physical world. So think about my mortuary example. Now you can basically track temperature in 150 different locations around the country, all remotely. VR and AR, haven't really seen this from a business point of view. I know the mines are quite big into this for training. If you want to do like training with virtual reality goggles and augmented reality. And then obviously the world has gone quite environmentally conscious, which is a good thing, to be environmentally responsible. So being ethical and environmental as part of the decision making will continue to factor into all of these things. All right. So any questions before I dive into some examples?
Okay, so our question is just, I think you said on the PowerPoint that robots and AI might kind of be the future, there's AI and there's robots. And I think, would you say that robots might be, in the future, might take people's jobs? And how can we make sure that the robot does not take our job, if that makes sense?
Be the owner of the robot. That's the sure proof way to not let the robot take your job. You do the buying of the robots. So if you think about it, right, say you've got a great business idea, say you want to manufacture, or like say you've got a great idea for a new sports drink, okay? Now you need to manufacture that sports drink. You know, maybe 30 years ago when equipment wasn't sophisticated, you'd be like, okay, well, to launch the sports drink, I need to hire 50 people. I need to have factory workers. I need some guy in like the stocks receiving department. I need some guy with a pallet jack to load all my bottles. I need some guy to stack the assembly line and the filling line. Whereas if you now fast forward to where we are now, and you say, well, let's write a business plan for a new sports drink, it would look totally different. You'd be like, okay, cool. Where can I do it? What's the best machines I can buy that need the least amount of people? How can it be as automated as possible? And how can I buy robots now that take that pallet from there to there so that you don't need to hire for the people? So chances are what will happen over time is as new businesses start and already start quite efficient, they will need less and less people. So it's not that they will take jobs, existing jobs, they just might not be those jobs anymore because they get automated. So it's not like you're going to wake up one day and be like, there's a robot doing my work. You know, it's not going to be like that. They'll just be like, oh, no businesses are hiring people, basically. But all of those people, all of those jobs will just shift in different industries. So yeah, I mean, like I said, be the owner of the robot, so be the owner of the sports drink factory rather than the guy pouring the sports drink into the bottle. That would be the best advice I could give you.